After my emergency appendectomy, I texted my husband from the recovery room asking him to pick me up. He replied, "Can't leave dinner with Victoria right now. Major client presentation tomorrow. Take an Uber home, babe." I stared at those words through my medication haze and typed back, "Okay." What Officer Patterson said when she walked into the Ivory Room that evening made Marcus wish he'd chosen differently. But let me take you back to this morning, when everything still felt normal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When I still believed that 10 years of marriage meant something more than a signature on a lease. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., same as every weekday for the past decade. I reached over to silence it before it could wake Marcus, my hand moving automatically through the dark. The bed beside me was already empty. He'd been getting up earlier lately, sometimes before dawn, claiming he needed quiet time to prepare for important meetings. I found him in the kitchen, dressed in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, the one I'd saved 3 months of overtime shifts to buy him last Christmas. He was scrolling through his phone, that soft smile playing at his lips. The smile that used to be mine before Victoria Ashford became his boss 6 months ago. "Coffee's ready," I said, pouring him a cup in the insulated travel mug he preferred. 2 sugars, splash of cream, exactly how he liked it. 10 years of marriage, and I could make his coffee without thinking, my hands knowing the ritual while my mind wandered to my own day ahead. Double shift at Metropolitan General, inventory management meeting at 3, then hopefully home by 8. "Thanks," Marcus said without looking up from his screen. His fingers moved quickly across the glass, typing something that made that smile deepen. "Victoria wants to go over the Brennan account before the presentation. Might need to do a working dinner tonight." Wednesday. It was always Wednesday now. 6 months ago, working dinners happened maybe once a quarter. Now they were weekly occurrences, always on Wednesdays when I worked my late shift and wouldn't be home until after 9. Always at the Ivory Room, that restaurant with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, where entrees started at $60 and a decent bottle of wine cost more than my car payment. Another one? I kept my voice neutral while cracking eggs into the pan. Scrambled, slightly runny, the way he insisted they had to be. That's the 4th Wednesday this month. The Brennan account is worth $3 million, Sophia. His tone carried that edge of patient condescension he perfected over the past year. Victoria needs me on this. She specifically requested I handle the presentation. Victoria. Always Victoria. Victoria thinks this. Victoria needs that. Victoria requested, Victoria insisted, Victoria preferred. I'd watched my husband's vocabulary transform over 6 months, every other sentence starting with her name like a prayer or an incantation. I plated his eggs beside 2 strips of bacon, crispy enough to shatter, and the wheat toast he preferred since reading some article about complex carbohydrates. The plate looked like a magazine spread, arranged with the kind of care that comes from trying to make everyday moments feel special. Or maybe just from trying to be enough. "Will you make it to the hospital anniversary gala next month?" I asked, setting the plate in front of him. "They're honoring the surgical nursing team. I'm receiving a 10-year service recognition." Marcus glanced up from his phone, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt maybe, or just inconvenience. "When is it again?" "April 12th. I told you last month. And the month before that." "Right, yeah. I'll try. Depends on what's happening with the Brennan follow-up." He forked eggs into his mouth, still reading whatever was on his screen. "This is good. Thanks." 10 years, and "this is good" was the most enthusiastic he got about anything I did. Meanwhile, Victoria apparently made observations that were brilliant. Suggestions that were game-changing. Presentations that were masterful. I knew because I'd overheard him on the phone with his father, describing her in terms he'd never used for me. Sharp. Strategic. Visionary. I was good. She was brilliant. The distinction felt important. I watched him eat while I sipped my own coffee, too bitter because I'd forgotten to add cream, too distracted by the way he kept glancing at his phone between bites. The screen lit up repeatedly with notifications, and each time his face brightened in a way that made my chest feel tight. "New cologne?" I asked. It was sharper than his usual scent, more expensive smelling. Something woody and complex that probably came in a bottle shaped like modern art. Victoria suggested it. Said the old one wasn't executive level. He said it casually, like it was perfectly normal for his boss to have opinions about how he smelled. She has good instincts about these things. Image matters in client relations. Image. Executive level. Client relations. The corporate jargon had invaded our marriage like a foreign language I'd never learned to speak fluently. I was a surgical nurse. I knew about sterile fields and patient advocacy and how to keep someone alive when their body was failing. I didn't know about executive presence or strategic positioning or whatever other skills Victoria apparently possessed that made her so indispensable to my husband's daily existence. "I should go," Marcus said, standing and straightening his tie. The burgundy one. Victoria had complimented it last week during a video call I'd accidentally walked in on. He'd worn it every Wednesday since. Big day. The presentation's at 2, then dinner with Victoria to debrief. Debrief, I repeated. That's what we're calling it? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his expression carried that particular blend of irritation and bafflement that suggested I was being unreasonable about something obvious. "Sophia, she's my boss. This is my career. I thought you understood that upward mobility requires sacrifice." Sacrifice. Interesting word choice. I was sacrificing him. He was sacrificing our marriage. Victoria wasn't sacrificing anything except maybe her own marriage, though Marcus assured me she was divorced, had been for years, completely available for all these necessary working dinners. "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood more than he realized. He kissed my forehead absently, the gesture automatic and empty, like checking a box on a list of husband duties. Then he was gone, taking his expensive cologne and his brightened expression and his complete attention with him. The front door closed with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the debris of his breakfast, and tried to remember when I'd become furniture in my own marriage. When had I stopped being Sophia, the woman he'd promised to love in sickness and health, and become simply the person who made his coffee and kept his house and worked double shifts to help pay for the lifestyle he'd decided we needed to maintain? The pain started during morning rounds at 6:45 a.m. A dull ache in my lower right abdomen that I dismissed as stress or maybe something I'd eaten. By 9:30, during a post-op check on Mr. Hensley in room 412, the ache had sharpened into something that made me grip the bed rail for support. "You okay, Nurse Rivera?" Mr. Hensley asked, his voice gravelly from the breathing tube they'd removed an hour earlier. "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile while my abdomen felt like someone was twisting a knife just above my hip. "Just need some water." "How's your pain level?" But by 10:15, I wasn't fine at all. I was in the staff bathroom, doubled over the sink, watching my reflection turn the color of old newspaper. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the air conditioning that kept the hospital perpetually frigid. The pain had evolved from sharp to excruciating, radiating from my lower right side in waves that made breathing an accomplishment. Keiko found me there, gripping the porcelain like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Keiko Tanaka, my friend for 5 years, the kind of surgical nurse who could spot a crisis from across a unit. Her face shifted from concern to alarm in the space of a heartbeat. "Sophia, you're burning up." Her hand pressed against my forehead, then moved to my abdomen. When she touched the lower right quadrant, I nearly blacked out. "How long have you been in pain?" "Couple hours." "It's probably nothing." "It's not nothing. You're guarding, you're febrile, and you look like you're about to pass out." She was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling Dr. Patel." "Keiko, I have 3 more hours on my shift. Mrs. Morrison needs her dressing changed, and the new admit in 408 can be handled by literally anyone else." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her voice carried that no-nonsense tone she used with difficult patients. You're not walking out of this bathroom. You're getting a gurney and an ultrasound. The next hour blurred into the kind of surreal experience that only happens when you're suddenly on the wrong side of the healthcare equation. One moment I was Nurse Rivera, competent and capable, handling other people's crises with professional efficiency. The next I was a patient on a gurney, staring at ceiling tiles I'd passed under 1,000 times but never really seen. Dr. Patel appeared above me, her dark eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. We'd worked together for 6 years. She knew my coffee order and my work ethic and apparently my appendix, which she was now examining via ultrasound with the kind of focused attention that told me everything I needed to know before she said a word. Appendicitis, she confirmed, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Advanced. I'd say you've been ignoring symptoms for at least 12 hours, maybe longer. We need to operate now, Sophia. It could rupture any minute. The word rupture cut through the medication fog they'd started pushing through my peritonitis. Sepsis. The complications I'd seen destroy patients who waited too long. I'd held hands and monitored vitals and watched people fight for their lives because an inflamed appendix had burst and flooded their abdomen with infection. How long? My voice sounded strange, thin and distant. Prep and surgery, about 2 hours. Recovery, maybe another hour before you're lucid enough to go home. You'll need someone to pick you up. Hospital policy. Who should we call? The automatic answer formed before I could stop it, Marcus. My husband. Dr. Patel nodded, already typing on her tablet. Phone number? I recited it from memory, those 10 digits I'd known for a decade, and watched her dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Dr. Patel left a message, professional and clear, explaining that I was having emergency surgery and needed someone to collect me in approximately 3 hours. He's probably in his presentation, I said, though something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with the appendicitis. He'll call back. They wheeled me toward the surgical wing, and I pulled out my own phone with shaking hands. The screen swam in and out of focus, but I managed to open my messages and type, emergency appendectomy. Need you to pick me up in about 3 hours. Dr. Patel called. Please confirm. The message showed as delivered. Then read. Those 2 little blue check marks that meant Marcus had seen it, had opened it, was probably formulating his response right now. The orderly pushed me through double doors into pre-op. Nurses I'd worked with for years suddenly hovered over me with concerned faces, helping me into a surgical gown, checking my vitals, inserting additional 4 lines. Someone squeezed my hand. Someone else smoothed my hair back from my forehead. The kindness felt overwhelming, magnified by fear and medication and the growing understanding that my body was actively trying to poison itself from the inside. My phone buzzed. I grabbed for it with desperate hope, nearly yanking the 4 line from my hand. Marcus, can't leave dinner with Victoria right now. Major client presentation tomorrow. Take an Uber home, babe. I read it 3 times, certain the pre-op medication was making me hallucinate. Surely my husband of 10 years hadn't just suggested I take an Uber home from emergency surgery. Surely he hadn't prioritized a dinner meeting over the fact that I was about to go under general anesthesia and have an organ removed from my body. But there it was, in the blue bubble of his text message. 20 words that somehow captured everything wrong with our marriage in a single breath. The casual dismissal. The prioritization of Victoria's time over my health. The suggestion that I handle my own medical emergency like I'd called asking for a ride to the grocery store. Sophia. The anesthesiologist appeared at my side, a kind-faced woman whose name I couldn't remember through the fog of shock and pain. We're ready for you. Any questions before we begin? I looked at my phone again, at Marcus's message, and something inside me cracked. Not my heart exactly, though that was certainly involved. It was something more structural, more foundational. The framework of belief that had held my marriage together for a decade, the assumption that when it really mattered, when everything was falling apart, Marcus would choose me. I typed with numb fingers, okay. One word. The same word I'd been saying for months, maybe years, every time Marcus chose Victoria's schedule over mine, every time he dismissed my concerns as dramatic or needy or unreasonable. Okay. As if any of this was okay. As if emergency surgery was the kind of thing you Ubered home from. The anesthesiologist was talking about counting backward from 10, about going to sleep and waking up in recovery, about how everything would be fine. I wanted to tell her that nothing was fine, that my husband had just abandoned me in the most literal sense possible, but my tongue felt thick and the room was tilting sideways. Contact, someone asked. Who should we notify after surgery? Try her husband again, another voice answered. He might have been in a meeting. But I knew better. Marcus wasn't in a meeting. He was at the Ivory Room with Victoria Ashford, eating $60 salmon and discussing strategic positioning while his wife was being opened up and having pieces of her removed. He'd seen my message. He'd read it. He'd made his choice. The medication pulled me under before I could say anything else, dragging me down into chemical unconsciousness where I wouldn't have to think about Marcus or Victoria or the 10 years I'd spent making breakfast and arranging plates and being good enough but never brilliant. My last conscious thought was wondering if Officer Patterson was working tonight. I woke up in stages, consciousness returning in fragments like a puzzle being assembled by clumsy hands. First came the beeping, steady and electronic. Then the chemical smell of antiseptic mixed with something sweeter, almost floral. Then pain, a deep ache in my abdomen that felt both distant and immediate, muffled by whatever they'd pumped into my system but present enough to confirm I was alive. Sophia? Keiko's face swam into focus above me, her features soft with concern. Hey, you're okay. Surgery went perfectly. Dr. Patel said your appendix was about an hour from rupturing. Good thing you came in when you did. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. Keiko held a cup of water with a straw to my lips, and I managed a few sips before the question that mattered forced its way out. Marcus? Her expression shifted, and I knew the answer before she said anything. We've called him 4 times. Hospital policy requires someone to pick you up, so we kept trying. The calls go straight to voicemail now. 4 times. For separate attempts to reach my husband, to inform him that his wife had survived emergency surgery and needed him. And he'd sent every call to voicemail, then turned off his phone entirely rather than be interrupted during his dinner with Victoria. The recognition of that fact settled over me like a weighted blanket made of ice. Marcus had chosen to make himself unreachable while I was being cut open and having pieces of me removed. Not because he didn't know, my text had shown as read. Not because he couldn't, the Ivory Room was 15 minutes from the hospital. But because Victoria's time, Victoria's needs, Victoria's presence was simply more important than mine. What time is it? My voice came out rough, damaged from the breathing tube. 7:45. You've been in recovery for about an hour. Keiko pulled a chair close to my bedside, her hand finding mine on the blanket. Dr. Patel wants to observe you for another hour, maybe 2, before discharge. We'll keep trying your husband. I looked at my phone on the side table, the screen dark and silent. No missed calls. No texts asking if I was okay, if the surgery went well, if I needed anything. Just that single message, still sitting there like evidence. Take an Uber home, babe. My hand moved almost without conscious direction, picking up the phone and opening my texts. The messages to Marcus showed delivered but not read anymore. He'd turned off read receipts, probably so Victoria wouldn't see him checking his phone during their important dinner. Or maybe so I wouldn't see him ignoring my messages while I recovered from surgery. I typed slowly, my fingers clumsy with medication and exhaustion. Surgery done. Appendix out. Still at hospital. Need pickup. The message delivered but didn't show as read. Marcus's phone was off or on Do Not Disturb, which amounted to the same thing. He'd made himself completely unavailable to his wife recovering from emergency surgery. Sophia, Keiko said gently, I can drive you home when you're discharged. Or we can call your brother, or I know exactly where Marcus is, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. The Ivory Room on Harbor Street. Table by the window. He goes there every Wednesday with Victoria Ashford, his boss. Keiko's hand tightened on mine. Every Wednesday? For 6 months now. Working dinners, he calls them. Strategic planning. Client preparation. Executive development. The words came out flat, drained of the belief I'd been trying to maintain. He knows I work late Wednesdays. Convenient. A different nurse appeared then, Officer Patterson, though she wasn't in scrubs. She wore the dark blue uniform of the Metropolitan Police Department, her badge catching the fluorescent lights as she approached my bed. I recognized her immediately. She picked up her mother's heart medication from Metropolitan General's pharmacy every month, always chatty, always asking about my day. Sofia Rivera? Her voice carried professional concern. I was doing my rounds, checking on the units, and heard about your situation. Your husband hasn't responded to hospital calls? Something in her tone suggested she understood this was about more than just a missed phone call. Maybe she'd seen enough domestic situations to recognize the pattern. Maybe she just had good instincts. Either way, I saw understanding dawn in her expression as I explained. He's at the Ivory Room with his boss, Victoria Ashford. He texted that he couldn't leave their dinner to pick me up. Suggested I take an Uber home from emergency surgery. I paused, tasting the bitterness of those words. I know the table. By the window, Harbor View. They sit there every Wednesday. Officer Patterson pulled out a small notebook, the kind cops carry in their breast pockets. Every Wednesday, you said? For 6 months. Same restaurant, same table, same excuse about client presentations and strategic planning. My voice remained steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Even after I texted about the surgery, he chose to stay there. For hospital calls, all ignored. Keiko shifted beside me, and I could feel her anger radiating outward. He told her to take an Uber. From emergency surgery. Officer Patterson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Rivera, I need to complete an incident report about the surgery and your emergency contact's failure to respond. Standard procedure when a patient has no available pickup. She met my eyes directly. Would it be helpful if someone delivered that message in person? Sometimes people don't fully understand the severity of a situation until it's explained face to face. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. She wasn't just asking if I needed someone to fetch Marcus. She was asking if I wanted him to face consequences, to experience public accountability, to understand that abandoning your wife during emergency surgery wasn't something that could be texted away. Yes, I said, and my voice carried a clarity that surprised me. I think Marcus needs to understand how serious this was. He's at the Ivory Room on Harbor Street. The table by the window with the woman in the designer suit. That would be Victoria Ashford, his boss. They should be finishing their $60 entrees right about now. Officer Patterson nodded slowly, a slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. The Ivory Room. Harbor Street. Table by the window. I know exactly where that is. She clicked her pen closed. Consider the message delivered, Mrs. Rivera. Someone from our department will ensure your husband fully grasps the situation. After she left, Keiko leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Did you just send the police to crash Marcus's dinner date? Working dinner, I corrected, the medication making me feel distant and floaty but somehow more clear-headed than I'd been in months. He was very specific about that distinction. It's a working dinner with his boss to prepare for tomorrow's client presentation. Nothing inappropriate at all. Sure, Keiko said, her tone dry. And that's why he ignored 4 calls from the hospital and told his wife recovering from emergency surgery to take an Uber. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't stop seeing it in my mind, the Ivory Room with its elegant ambience and harbor views. Marcus in his Tom Ford suit, leaning across the table to catch every word Victoria said. The wine glasses reflecting candlelight. The intimate conversation that was supposedly about client strategies and business development. The moment when Officer Patterson would walk through that door, her uniform dark and official against all that white tablecloth elegance, and approach their table while every other diner turned to watch. The look on Marcus's face when he realized his wife hadn't just accepted his abandonment quietly. When he understood that there were consequences for choosing a dinner date over emergency surgery. When the careful image he'd been constructing, the devoted husband, the hard worker, the rising corporate star, crumbled in front of his boss and a restaurant full of witnesses. "You're smiling," Keiko observed. I opened my eyes. Am I? Just a little. A very satisfied little smile. Maybe I was. Or maybe the pain medication was finally kicking in properly. Either way, I felt something shifting inside me, some framework that had been holding my life together for 10 years beginning to crack and reform into a different shape entirely. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart jumped. Maybe Marcus had finally checked his messages, finally realized what he'd done. But it was just a notification from the hospital billing system, reminding me about insurance coverage and payment plans. Another buzz. A text from Julian, my brother. Keiko called me. On my way. 20 minutes out. Not Marcus. Never Marcus, who was still at the Ivory Room, still prioritizing Victoria's time, still completely unaware that his world was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. I settled back against the pillows and waited for Officer Patterson to deliver my message in person. Julian arrived at 8:20, his architect's portfolio still tucked under one arm like he'd come straight from a client meeting. His face cycled through relief, anger, and something colder when he saw me hooked up to monitors, pale against the white hospital sheets. "Keiko gave me the basics," he said, pulling a chair close. "Emergency surgery. Marcus nowhere to be found. Fill in the rest." So I did. And as I talked, tracing the timeline backward through 6 months of Wednesday dinners and dismissed concerns, I realized I'd been building a case without knowing it. Evidence had been accumulating in credit card statements and changed routines and small behavioral shifts that I'd rationalized away one by one. It started last October. Marcus came home from the firm's annual retreat talking about Victoria Ashford, the new VP of Finance that Harold Caldwell had recruited from their main competitor. "Brilliant," Marcus had said. "Strategic mind. Really understands the industry in ways most executives don't." I'd thought nothing of it then. Marcus always admired competent people. It was one of the things I'd loved about him early on, his appreciation for excellence, his drive to learn from those who were better. When he mentioned Victoria had invited him to shadow her on the Brennan account, I'd been happy for him. Professional development. Mentorship. Career advancement. The first working dinner happened 3 weeks later. A Wednesday, though I didn't register the pattern yet. Marcus came home at 11, smelling of expensive wine and that particular energy that comes from stimulating conversation. He'd talked for an hour about Victoria's approach to client relations, her negotiation strategies, her insights into market trends. I'd listened and encouraged and felt pleased that he'd found a mentor. The second dinner was 2 weeks after that. Another Wednesday. This time he came home at midnight, slightly drunk, still talking about Victoria. How she'd handled a difficult client. How she'd restructured a failing account. How she saw opportunities others missed. I'd started to notice he said, Victoria, the way other people said genius, or revolutionary, with a kind of reverence that suggested something beyond professional respect. By December, the Wednesday dinners were weekly. Always at the Ivory Room, which Marcus explained was Victoria's favorite restaurant. Always running late, sometimes until 1 or 2 in the morning. Always followed by detailed recountings of everything Victoria had said, thought, or suggested. I'd tried to talk to him about it once, carefully, over breakfast. "Do you think maybe Victoria is taking up a lot of your time?" I'd asked, pouring his coffee. Marcus had looked at me with genuine surprise. "She's my boss, Sophia. And she's teaching me things I'd never learn otherwise. This is how careers are built at executive level. You work closely with people who can elevate you." Elevate. That was the word he'd used. As if Victoria was lifting him somewhere I couldn't reach, somewhere I wasn't qualified to follow. I'd let it drop, not wanting to seem jealous or small-minded or threatened by my husband's professional growth. January brought new patterns. Marcus started working out at 5 a.m., suddenly concerned about fitness and appearance in ways he'd never been before. He bought new suits, more expensive than anything in his closet. He changed his cologne after Victoria mentioned his old one seemed dated. He started using phrases she used: strategic positioning, executive presence, optics matter. I'd noticed his phone habits changing too. Face down during dinner. Password protected when it hadn't been before. Constant checking, even during conversations, with that soft smile when certain names appeared on the screen. I'd asked once to see a funny meme he'd mentioned, and he'd angled the phone away slightly, showed me the screen without letting me touch it, then immediately locked it again. "You've changed your password," I'd observed. Security protocol. Victoria recommended everyone on the senior team use enhanced device security. Corporate espionage is real, Sophia. Corporate espionage. As if Victoria's text messages required the same protection as classified documents. February was when I started finding the credit card statements. The Ivory Room charges were always high, $200, $300, sometimes $400 for a Wednesday dinner. Wine that cost $90 a bottle. Appetizers and desserts and after-dinner cordials. The itemized receipts told stories of long, leisurely meals that stretched across hours. I'd tried to bring it up casually. "The dinner expenses are getting pretty high." "That's what client development costs," Marcus had replied without looking up from his phone. "You have to spend money to make money. Victoria says the Brennan account alone will cover these expenses 10 times over." Victoria says. Victoria thinks. Victoria believes. She become the ultimate authority on everything from career strategy to cologne choices to how much money we should spend on Wednesday dinners while I worked double shifts to cover our mortgage. March brought the final pieces I hadn't wanted to assemble into a complete picture. I'd gotten home early one Wednesday. A colleague had covered the last hours of my shift, and found Marcus in our bedroom, door closed, voice low and intimate in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "No, I can't tonight," he'd been saying. "Sophia's home early. Tomorrow?" "Yes, the usual table." "I know. Me too." He'd startled when I opened the door, his face cycling through guilt and annoyance before settling on casual innocence. That was Victoria. Rescheduling our strategy session. It sounded personal. "We've worked together for 6 months, Sophia. We're friendly. That's how professional relationships work at this level." His tone had carried that edge of patient condescension again, suggesting I was naive about corporate culture, unsophisticated about how ambitious people operated. I'd let it go because confronting it meant acknowledging what I already knew but didn't want to admit. That my husband was having an affair, or close enough to one that the distinction didn't matter. That Wednesday dinners at the Ivory Room weren't about client strategies or business development. That Victoria Ashford had become more important to Marcus than I was, and I'd stood by and watched it happen, making his breakfast and doing his laundry and working extra shifts to fund the very meals where he was falling in love with someone else. "So tonight," Julian said, bringing me back to the present, "when you actually needed him. He chose Victoria. Again. Like he's been choosing her every Wednesday for 6 months." I looked at my brother, at the controlled fury in his expression. "I'm not being paranoid or jealous or dramatic, am I? Sophia, you had emergency surgery and he suggested you take an Uber. Even if there was nothing romantic with Victoria, which there clearly is, that alone is divorce-worthy." Julian pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Dmitry Kozlov. Best locksmith in the city. And Rosa Martinez, she runs a moving company that specializes in quick extractions. By tomorrow morning, Marcus's clothes will be in boxes and his key won't work. Julian, it's been 10 years. I can't just..." "Can't just what? Expect basic human decency from your husband? Demand that emergency surgery take priority over a dinner date?" His voice softened. "Sis, He's been showing you who he is for 6 months. You've just been too kind to believe it. My phone buzzed then. Not Marcus, still radio silence from my husband recovering somewhere with Victoria Ashford. This was Officer Patterson, message delivered. Your husband has been notified of your condition and the hospital's concern about his availability. He seemed surprised by the visit. I could imagine it. Marcus and Victoria at their table by the window, dessert plates cleared, probably lingering over coffee or after-dinner drinks. The way conversations would stop when Officer Patterson walked in, her uniform dark against all that elegant ambience. The moment when she approached their table and every eye in that restaurant turned to watch. The look on Marcus's face when he realized what I'd done. My phone erupted with notifications starting at 8:47 p.m. Marcus, finally, desperately trying to reach me after Officer Patterson's visit had shattered his carefully constructed evening. The first text, Sophia, I'm so sorry. The police just told me about your surgery. Why didn't you say it was serious? I stared at those words, my medication-fogged brain struggling to process the audacity. I had said it was serious. Emergency appendectomy wasn't exactly ambiguous language. But Marcus had a gift for rewriting history to make his choices seem reasonable. The second text arrived before I could respond, I'm leaving now. Be there in 20 minutes. The third, Victoria understands. She said family comes first. Victoria understands. Victoria said. Even now, even in his apology, she was there, her opinion mattering enough to mention. As if her permission or understanding was required for him to leave a dinner date to check on his wife after surgery. Julian watched my face as I read the messages. Let me guess. He's suddenly available now that the police embarrassed him in public? 20 minutes, he says. I set the phone down without responding. Funny how he can make it in 20 minutes when his reputation is at stake, but couldn't manage it 3 hours ago when it was just me bleeding on an operating table. My phone rang. Marcus calling, probably expecting me to answer immediately, to accept his sudden concern as genuine, to be grateful he was finally coming. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Again, I ignored it. Good, Julian said with satisfaction. Let him sweat. A text from Marcus, why aren't you answering? I'm worried about you. The laugh that escaped me was sharp and bitter. Worried. He was worried now, after Officer Patterson had walked into the Ivory Room and informed him that his wife had undergone emergency surgery while he was enjoying wine pairings with his boss. He wasn't worried 3 hours ago when I'd texted from pre-op. He wasn't worried during the 4 hospital calls that went to voicemail. He was worried now because his image had been damaged, because people had witnessed his abandonment, because the narrative he'd been constructing about himself had cracked in front of Victoria Ashford. Keiko reappeared with my discharge paperwork. Vitals look good. Pain management protocol is solid. Dr. Patel says you can go home, but you'll need someone with you for the next 24 hours. No driving, no lifting anything over 5 pounds, no stairs if possible. Julian's taking me, I said, ignoring another call from Marcus. And he'll stay tonight. Marcus is coming, Julian added, his voice carrying an edge. But he won't be staying. My phone buzzed with a text from Officer Patterson. How are you doing, Sophia? Do you need anything else from the department? I typed back slowly, my fingers clumsy but determined, actually, yes. Would you mind meeting me at my house in Bellevue Estates? I may need someone official present when my husband arrives. Her response came quickly, address? I gave it to her, then looked at Julian. Call Dimitri. Tell him I need locks changed tonight, emergency rate if necessary. And Rosa Martinez, can she have people there by morning? Julian's expression shifted from surprise to approval. You're sure about this? Was I sure? I thought about 10 years of marriage, of breakfast routines and careful conversations and slowly disappearing into the background of my own life. I thought about 6 months of Wednesday dinners and credit card statements and that soft smile Marcus reserved for Victoria's text messages. I thought about lying in pre-op, watching my message show as read, knowing my husband had made a choice and it wasn't me. I thought about, take an Uber home, babe. I'm sure, I said. Marcus made his decision 3 hours ago. I'm just making mine now. Julian was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone named Dimitri. I could hear fragments, emergency situation, tonight if possible, yes, full security upgrade, money isn't the issue. Another call from Marcus. Another ignored ring. His texts were coming faster now, each one more desperate than the last. Please answer. I need to know you're okay. I'm in the parking garage. Where are you? The nurse won't tell me which room. This is ridiculous. Sophia, I said I was sorry. What more do you want? What more did I want? The question would have been laughable if it wasn't so perfectly illustrative of how little Marcus understood. He thought this was about tonight, about one missed pickup, about a single bad decision. He didn't see the pattern, the 6 months of erosion, the 1,000 small betrayals that had led to this moment. Or maybe he saw it and simply didn't think it mattered enough to change. I'm ready to go, I told Keiko, who had been hovering nearby with the careful awareness of someone who knew when to give space and when to intervene. She helped me into a wheelchair, hospital policy, even though I could walk, and Julian gathered my belongings. My phone was still buzzing with Marcus's calls and texts, creating a rhythm of desperation that felt oddly satisfying. For once, he was the one waiting, the one being ignored, the one desperate for a response that wouldn't come. We took the service elevator to avoid the main lobby where Marcus was probably pacing. Julian had parked in the staff lot, perks of having a sister who worked at the hospital, and within minutes we were pulling out onto Harbor Street. We passed the Ivory Room, its windows glowing with warm light, and I wondered if Victoria was still there, if she was processing what had happened, if she understood that Officer Patterson's visit had exposed more than just Marcus's absence. You're smiling again, Julian observed. Am I? That same satisfied smile from earlier. What are you thinking about? I watched the Ivory Room disappear in the side mirror. I'm thinking about how Marcus is probably still in that parking garage, calling my phone, wondering where I am. And how for the first time in 6 months, he's the one who doesn't know where I am or what I'm doing. He's the one being left waiting while I'm somewhere else, making decisions without him. Good, Julian said simply. He's had enough of your time. My phone buzzed one more time. Not Marcus, Officer Patterson, I'll be at your house in 30 minutes. Take your time. I'll wait in my patrol car outside until you're ready. I looked at Julian. How fast can Dimitri change locks? He said he'd be there by 10. Full security system upgrade, new smart locks, the works. Julian glanced at me. By midnight, Marcus's key won't open anything. By morning, his belongings will be packed. By tomorrow night, he'll be sleeping somewhere else. 10 years reduced to a timeline of hours. The thought should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it felt like surgery, painful but necessary, cutting away something infected before it could poison everything around it. We pulled into Bellevue Estates at 9:15. Officer Patterson was already there, her patrol car parked discreetly down the street. She got out when she saw us, approaching with professional concern that somehow felt personal. How are you feeling, Sophia? Like I'm about to change my life, I said. And meant it. Dmitry Kozlov arrived at 9:45 in an unmarked van, a compact man in his 50s with the efficient movements of someone who changed locks in worse situations than mine. He took one look at me in Julian's arms, still weak from surgery, and his weathered face softened. Emergency raid is waived, he said in accented English. I have daughters. No man should leave his wife during surgery. He turned to Julian. Full security upgrade, you said? Smart locks, reinforced strike plates, window sensors? Everything, Julian confirmed. By morning, this place should be Fort Knox. While Dmitry began his work, the sound of drilling and metal on metal filling the townhouse, Julian helped me settle on the couch with pillows supporting my surgical site. Officer Patterson had positioned herself strategically by the front window, visible from the street but not intrusive. "He'll be here soon," she said quietly. "Your phone's been going off constantly." I glanced at the screen. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. Marcus had progressed from apologetic to confused to angry, his texts charting a predictable emotional arc. "I'm at the hospital. They said you already left. Where are you? This isn't funny. Julian took you? Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk about this like adults. You're being unreasonable." I said I was sorry. The final text had arrived 3 minutes ago. "I'm coming home. We're going to discuss this face to face." "He thinks this is a misunderstanding," I said to no one in particular. "Something we can talk through and resolve." Julian looked up from his phone where he was coordinating with Rosa Martinez. "Does he think you're stupid? That you didn't notice 6 months of Wednesday dinners with his boss?" My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Marcus. The message was from an unknown number, but the content made my stomach drop. "Sophia, this is Victoria Ashford. I got your number from Marcus's emergency contacts. I need you to know that nothing inappropriate has happened between Marcus and me. Tonight was purely professional, and I'm horrified by what occurred. I had no idea he hadn't made arrangements for your care. I'm so sorry you went through this." I read it twice, then handed the phone to Julian. Victoria's covering her bases. He scanned the message, his expression darkening. "Nothing inappropriate. That's what people say when something inappropriate has definitely happened. Also, how does she have access to his emergency contacts?" Officer Patterson moved closer to read over Julian's shoulder. "That's interesting timing. She's establishing a narrative before you have a chance to." Before I could respond, Keiko arrived with an overnight bag she'd packed from my hospital locker. Behind her came another woman I didn't immediately recognize, Dr. Okonkwo's wife, Maria, who managed patient advocacy at Metropolitan General. "Keiko called me," Maria explained. "I'm here unofficially, but I want you to know that if you need any documentation of tonight's events, the hospital has detailed records of all attempted contact with your husband, timestamps of when he was notified, and Officer Patterson's incident report." "Documentation," I repeated. "For what?" Maria's expression was kind but serious. "Sophia, I've worked in patient advocacy for 15 years. I've seen situations like this before. A spouse's absence during a medical emergency can be relevant in divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, even financial settlements. I'm not saying you need it now, but if you decide you want it later, everything is preserved and available." The word divorce hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't said it out loud yet, hadn't let myself think that far ahead. But hearing it from someone else made it real, possible, something that could actually happen rather than just a dramatic threat. Dimitri emerged from the bedroom hallway, holding up 2 new smart keys. Master bedroom, back door, and front entrance all rekeyed. "Old keys won't work. These 2 are coded to your fingerprint." He demonstrated on a sleek panel by the front door. "You can also control everything from phone app. Add or remove access remotely. Very secure." "What about the garage?" Julian asked. "Already done. I'm installing window sensors now, then motion-activated exterior lights. Should be finished in 30 minutes. Dimitri glanced at Officer Patterson. "You expecting trouble tonight?" "Possibly," she said. "Husband doesn't know he's being locked out yet." Dimitri nodded like this was completely normal, which I supposed it was in his line of work. "I'll stay until he arrives. Sometimes men get aggressive when they realize they've lost access." My phone rang. Marcus, for the 23rd time. I let it go to voicemail, but this time he left a message. Officer Patterson gestured for permission before playing it on speaker. Marcus's voice filled the room, strained and irritated. "Sophia, I don't understand what's happening." I apologized. "I'm trying to come home and check on you, and you're avoiding me like I'm some kind of criminal. This is childish. Whatever you think happened tonight, we can talk about it. Just let me in when I get there." Whatever you think happened, Julian repeated. He's already rewriting it. Making it about your perception instead of his actions. Keiko settled into the chair beside me. Do you want me to stay tonight? I can sleep on the couch, help with anything you need. I'm staying, Julian said firmly. But yes, the more witnesses, the better. Officer Patterson's radio crackled. She stepped away to respond, then returned with updated information. Dispatch just got a call from your husband. He's reporting his wife missing from the hospital. They're routing him to me since I handled the incident report. He called the police? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. He's reporting me missing? It's a control tactic, Maria said quietly. When the narrative starts slipping away from them, some people try to reclaim it by positioning themselves as the concerned party. Now he gets to tell officers that his wife disappeared from the hospital, that he's worried about her well-being, that he's just a devoted husband trying to find his spouse. Officer Patterson was already typing on her phone. I'm responding that you're safe at home with family, recovering as expected, and that you've requested no contact tonight. That should handle it officially. Headlights swept across the front windows. A car door slammed. Footsteps on the walkway, quick and purposeful. Marcus had arrived. Everyone stay calm, Officer Patterson said, positioning herself near the door. Let me handle initial contact. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by knocking. Sophia? I know you're in there. Julian's car is in the driveway. Marcus's voice carried through the door, controlled but edged with frustration. Can we please talk about this? Officer Patterson opened the door just enough to be visible, her uniform and badge immediately establishing authority. Mr. Caldwell. Your wife is resting comfortably and doesn't wish to be disturbed tonight. Disturbed? Marcus's voice rose. She's my wife. I have every right to see her after surgery. You had that right 3 hours ago when the hospital first contacted you, Officer Patterson said evenly. Mrs. Caldwell has requested no contact this evening. I suggest you respect that request. This is ridiculous. Sophia. He raised his voice, trying to see past Officer Patterson into the house. Can we please act like adults here? I looked at Julian, at Keiko, at Maria, and Dimitri, all these people who had dropped everything to support me tonight while my husband had been at the Ivory Room with Victoria Ashford. Then I looked at Officer Patterson, who had turned a routine hospital round into an intervention, who had walked into an expensive restaurant and delivered consequences Marcus never expected to face. Tell him, I said quietly, that his belongings will be packed and ready for pickup by tomorrow afternoon. And that his key no longer works. Officer Patterson's slight smile told me she'd been hoping I'd say exactly that. Through the narrow opening of the door, I could see Marcus's face cycling through emotions, confusion, anger, disbelief. He looked diminished somehow, his Tom Ford suit wrinkled from hours at the Ivory Room, his carefully styled hair disheveled from running his hands through it. My key doesn't work, he repeated, as if Officer Patterson had spoken a different language. What do you mean my key doesn't work? The locks have been changed, Mr. Caldwell. Your wife will make arrangements for you to collect your belongings tomorrow. Collect my belongings? His voice cracked on the last word. Sophia, this is insane. I made one mistake. One dinner ran late, and you're changing the locks. Officer Patterson's stance shifted slightly, becoming more official. Mr. Caldwell, you were contacted by the hospital at 2:30 this afternoon about your wife's emergency surgery. You responded via text message suggesting she take an Uber home. The hospital attempted to reach you 4 additional times. You made yourself unavailable during your wife's medical crisis to continue a dinner engagement. This isn't about one mistake. The words hung in the night air, and I watched Marcus process them. Being told by a police officer in uniform that his actions had been documented, time-stamped, official record made. This wasn't a private marital dispute he could reframe or reinterpret. This was fact, witnessed and preserved. Victoria needed me, he said, and the desperation in his voice made it clear he believed this excuse still held weight. She was having a crisis about the Brennan presentation. I couldn't just abandon her when she was. When she was what? I called from the couch, my voice carrying through the open door. Having an anxiety attack? Facing a stalker? What was Victoria's crisis tonight, Marcus? What was so urgent that my emergency surgery couldn't compete? Silence. Marcus tried to see past Officer Patterson, his eyes searching for me in the dim interior. Sophia, please. Can we talk privately? Without an audience? We had privacy at 2:30 when I texted you from pre-op. We had privacy during 4 hospital calls. You chose to maintain your privacy with Victoria instead. I shifted on the couch, pain radiating from my abdomen. Officer Patterson, what were his exact words when you found him at the Ivory Room? She consulted her notepad with professional precision. When I informed Mr. Caldwell that his wife had undergone emergency appendectomy and was in recovery, he said, and I quote, "She texted me about it." I thought she was exaggerating. Sophia tends to be dramatic about medical things. The words landed like physical blows. Marcus had told a police officer that I exaggerated medical emergencies. That I was dramatic. He'd minimized my surgery to a uniformed officer in front of Victoria Ashford and a restaurant full of witnesses. I didn't mean it like that, Marcus said quickly. It came out wrong. I was surprised, caught off guard. You told Victoria the same thing, I interrupted. Before the police arrived. You told her I was probably fine, that I tend to make things bigger than they are. Keiko heard it when she called the Ivory Room looking for you. Marcus's face paled. He hadn't known about that call, hadn't realized there were multiple witnesses to his dismissal of my surgery. Who else did you have spying on me? Spying? Julian appeared behind Officer Patterson, his presence filling the doorway. The hospital was trying to reach you through any means possible because your wife needed you. That's not spying. That's desperation. Julian. Marcus's tone shifted, man to man, reasonable. Come on. You know Sophia. She gets anxious about health stuff. I thought she was overreacting to appendicitis. People get their appendix out all the time. People also die when their appendix ruptures, Julian said flatly. Dr. Patel said Sophia was an hour away from peritonitis. But sure, she was just being dramatic. A car pulled up behind Marcus's sedan. Victoria Ashford emerged in her designer suit, her expression carefully composed. She approached with the confidence of someone used to controlling situations, though her eyes flickered uncertainly between Officer Patterson's uniform and Marcus's desperate stance. Marcus, I think you should go, Victoria said quietly. This isn't the time or place. You brought her? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. You brought Victoria to my house? She drove me, Marcus said. I had too much wine at dinner to drive safely. She was just giving me a ride home. How responsible, Keiko muttered from beside me. Victoria's carefully composed expression cracked slightly. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to be clear that I had no idea Marcus hadn't made arrangements for your care. If I'd known the situation, I would have insisted he leave immediately. You did know, I said. Keiko called the Ivory Room at 4:15 looking for Marcus. She explained to whoever answered that his wife was in surgery and the hospital needed to reach him. That call was transferred to your table. Victoria's face froze. I don't recall. The restaurant keeps phone logs, Officer Patterson interjected helpfully. They're part of my incident report. The night air suddenly felt charged with something beyond personal drama. This was becoming official, documented, the kind of thing that could affect careers and reputations. Victoria seemed to realize this simultaneously with Marcus, both of them exchanging a glance that confirmed everything I'd suspected about their relationship. We should go, Victoria said to Marcus. Let your wife rest. This can all be sorted out tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I'm not leaving, Marcus insisted. This is my house. Those are my things. You can't just lock me out because you're upset. Dimitri appeared in the hallway behind Julian, his drill still in hand. Actually, she can. The house is in her name. I checked the property records before changing the locks. Standard procedure. He looked at Marcus with professional neutrality. You're a guest here, legally speaking. And the property owner has asked you to leave. The house is in Sophia's name? Marcus's voice rose an octave. Since when? Since my grandmother left it to me 5 years ago, I said. The house you thought we owned together? That you'd been living in rent-free while spending our money on Wednesday dinners? That's mine. Always has been. I watched Marcus process this information, watched him realize that the foundation he'd been standing on was never as solid as he'd believed. The house wasn't ours. The money I earned wasn't funding our lifestyle, it was funding his. The power dynamic he'd assumed existed had been an illusion all along. Marcus, we really need to leave, Victoria said, her hand on his arm now. The gesture was familiar, intimate, the kind of touch that spoke of habit rather than spontaneity. This isn't going well. No, I agreed from my couch. It's not. Officer Patterson, can you escort them off the property? Happily, she said, stepping fully outside and gesturing toward the vehicles. Mr. Caldwell, Miss Ashford, it's time to go. Mrs. Caldwell needs rest and privacy. Marcus looked at me one last time, and something in his expression shifted from anger to recognition. He was finally understanding that this wasn't a fight he could win with explanations or apologies. This was consequences, real and immediate and completely outside his control. We'll talk tomorrow, he said, as if he still had negotiating power. Your belongings will be ready for pickup at 3 p.m., Julian said. Bring a truck. Victoria guided Marcus toward her white BMW, her hand still on his arm, and I noticed how naturally they moved together. 6 months of Wednesday dinners had created its own choreography, its own intimacy. They'd been a couple pretending to be colleagues for so long they'd forgotten which was the performance. Officer Patterson watched them drive away before returning to the doorway. That went better than most. Usually there's more yelling. Is it always this dramatic? I asked. When someone locks out their spouse? Usually more. You're handling this with remarkable calm. She smiled slightly. Though the pain medication probably helps. You're absolutely right, and I apologize. I've been consistently overshooting the 800-word target. Let me provide Part 8 rewritten to exactly 800 words. Rosa Martinez arrived at 6:30 a.m. with 3 crew members and enough boxes to dismantle a life. I'd barely slept, the pain medication wearing off around 4, leaving me awake and staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Rivera, Rosa said, her handshake firm. We'll treat everything with respect, document it all, and have Mr. Caldwell's belongings ready by 3 p.m. She handed me an inventory sheet. We photograph everything before packing. Note any damage. You'll have complete records. They started in the master bedroom while Julian made coffee. I settled on the couch, listening to tape pulled from rolls, packing paper rustling, quiet conversations about what belonged to whom. The watch is in the dresser, someone called out. His, I replied. All of them. 6 watches. The Rolex I'd bought for our 5th anniversary, working double shifts for 3 months. The Tag Heuer from his promotion. Expensive weights gathering importance in drawers. Golf clubs? His. $1,800 for networking tools he'd used maybe 4 times. They moved through his office, packing framed degrees, client awards, photos of Marcus at corporate events where I'd been cropped out. His professional life, carefully curated, with no space for a wife in scrubs. Mrs. Park appeared around 8 with kimchi stew. 72, lived 3 houses down, noticed everything. I saw the moving truck, she said. About time. Mrs. Park. That woman in the white BMW. She's been coming here Wednesdays for months. Always when you're at work. Stays 2, 3 hours. No judgment, just facts. I didn't know how to tell you. Victoria hadn't just been having dinners with Marcus. She'd been in my house, probably in my bed, while I worked late shifts saving for our future. Since when? January, maybe. Around New Year. Mrs. Park patted my hand. Recovery soup. This helped my daughter. After she left, I sat with this knowledge. Victoria had been in my home, my bedroom, my life, with Marcus's casual entitlement making it all possible. Rosa appeared. The office has joint financial documents. How should we handle those? Julian intercepted. Photograph everything. Separate his business records from joint accounts. We'll need copies for the lawyer. You called a lawyer? 3. Consultations next week. He sat carefully beside me. If Victoria was coming here, there are legal implications. By noon, 47 boxes lined the living room walls. His clothes, electronics, books about corporate strategy. Pale rectangles on walls where his things had hung. The closet looked cavernous with just my clothes. His cologne bottles? 8 of them. All his. The expensive ones Victoria recommended, replacing scents I'd actually liked. 10 years reduced to boxes and labels. It should have felt more painful. Instead, it felt like clearing clutter, making space to breathe. Rosa reviewed the inventory. 47 boxes total. Everything documented and photographed. My phone buzzed. Victoria, Sophia, we need to talk. There are things you don't understand about my relationship with Marcus. Julian snorted. She wants to control the narrative before lawyers get involved. Should I respond? Block her. But save the message first. Evidence. Officer Patterson returned around 2, off duty but checking in. How are you managing? The house feels bigger. She surveyed the boxes. This is one of the cleaner extractions I've seen. She handed me a card. My personal number. If Mr. Caldwell causes problems during pickup, call immediately. At 3 p.m., a U-Haul pulled into the driveway. Marcus emerged looking sleepless, his mother Eleanor beside him wearing sunglasses despite overcast skies. Julian went outside to supervise. Marcus stopped at the first box, his golf clubs, and stood there for a full minute before Eleanor's sharp voice cut through. Marcus, we don't have all day. Start loading. Box by box, they loaded 10 years into a truck. I watched Marcus's face change with each trip, watched him realize how much had been funded by my salary, my house, my tolerance. Julian appeared at the door. He wants to talk to you. No. That's what I told him. Through the window, Marcus stood beside the truck, staring at the house like seeing it for the first time. Or the last. Tell him his belongings go on the curb if he's not gone in 30 minutes. Julian delivered the message. Marcus's face crumbled. Eleanor pulled him toward the truck with impatient efficiency. They finished at 3:47. Marcus stood by the driver's door, looking back one final time. Eleanor said something sharp, and he climbed in. The U-Haul pulled away, taking everything Marcus owned and leaving my house feeling empty and clean and entirely mine. You're right to call me out. Let me rewrite part 9 to exactly 800 words. 3 days after the boxes left, Keiko sent me a screenshot from the Metropolitan General Staff chat. Marcus at Murphy's Pub, slumped over the bar at 2 p.m. on a weekday. Your ex is telling everyone you overreacted to a minor procedure, her message read. Says you kicked him out for missing one pickup. Bartender cut him off when he started crying. I stared at the photo. Marcus in wrinkled business casual, tie loosened, that carefully maintained image abandoned. The man who'd obsessed over executive presence was day drinking at a dive bar. Minor procedure? I typed back. Word for word. Says you were dramatic about appendicitis, that he had work obligations, that you punished him for being career-focused. Emergency surgery had become minor. Abandonment had become missing one pickup. 6 months with Victoria had vanished from his version entirely. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Caldwell? Jennifer Wu from Caldwell and Associates HR. Professional, careful. I'm calling regarding a workplace relationship that may violate company policy. We're conducting an investigation. Someone had reported Marcus and Victoria. Their affair was now under corporate scrutiny. I appreciate the call. If you have relevant information, emails, messages, we'd be grateful. Jennifer paused. Confidentially, Mrs. Rivera, I'm sorry for what you've gone through. I forwarded Victoria's texts to HR after we hung up. The messages claiming nothing inappropriate happened, the timeline proving she knew about my surgery. Small pieces telling a larger story. Julian called that afternoon. Marcus showed up at my office again. Security didn't stop him. Used a fake company name, scheduled a fake meeting. Made it to my floor before anyone realized. Julian sounded exhausted. Cornered me in the hallway. He looked terrible. Hasn't showered in days. What did he want? Convince you to talk to him. Said you're not answering calls, that he deserves to explain, that 10 years should count. Julian paused. Victoria ended things. Told him she can't risk her career for someone going through messy separation. Victoria had abandoned him the moment things got complicated. The woman whose crises had mattered more than my surgery disappeared now that Marcus was available. He's devastated, Julian continued. Kept saying Victoria was his soulmate, that they understood each other in ways you never did. Then begging me to help win you back. His soulmate dumped him, so now he wants his wife back. Exactly. Also, his father demoted him. Moved him out of the corner office, reassigned major clients. The Brennan account went to someone else. Harold Caldwell was cleaning house, containing scandal before it damaged the firm. Marcus had gone from rising star to liability in a week. There's more. He's been driving past your house. Mrs. Park called yesterday. She's seen his car 3 times, sitting across the street for hours. That's not concerning at all. Security cameras being installed tomorrow. Front and back, connected to your phone. That evening, Harold Caldwell texted, Sophia, I owe you an apology. I've learned things about my son's behavior that disgust me. The firm will cover any legal expenses. Marcus no longer speaks for this family. Even Marcus's father was distancing himself, protecting the Caldwell name by severing the problematic son. 10 years attending their dinners and holidays, trying to meet Elena's standards. Now Harold offered legal support against his own child. Dr. Patel called for my follow-up. How's the pain? Any fever? Healing well. Pain's manageable. Good. And emotionally? I heard about your situation. Her voice softened. Sometimes the body heals faster than everything else. I'm better than expected. That usually means you were ready to leave before crisis forced it. The appendix just gave permission. Had I been ready? I thought about the past year, growing distance, dismissed concerns, eroding intimacy. Maybe I'd been waiting for something definitive enough to justify leaving. My phone buzzed with email. Marcus, from another new address. I know you're blocking me, but please read this. I've been in therapy. I understand now what I did wrong. Victoria meant nothing. She used me, manipulated me. You're my wife. We took vows. Doesn't that deserve conversation? Victoria meant nothing, but she'd been his soulmate 3 days ago. She'd manipulated him, but he'd spent 6 months choosing her. The narrative kept shifting, always positioning Marcus as victim. I forwarded the email to Julian without responding. Let Marcus scream into the void. 6 weeks after surgery, I hosted dinner at my house for the first time. Nothing elaborate, pasta, salad, wine from the grocery store that cost $12 instead of $90. Keiko came with her husband. Julian brought his new girlfriend. Dr. Patel stopped by after her shift, still in scrubs. We ate on mismatched plates I'd bought at a thrift store the week before. Blue with tiny flowers, yellow with geometric patterns, plain white with a small chip. Marcus would have been mortified. I found them perfect. To Sophia's recovery, Dr. Patel raised her glass. Both surgical and personal. Everyone drank. The conversation flowed easily: hospital gossip, Julian's latest architectural project, Keiko's daughter's college applications. No one mentioned Marcus. No one asked if I was okay. They could see I was. The house looks different, Keiko observed. Lighter somehow. 47 boxes worth of lighter, I said, and everyone laughed. After they left, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes by hand, something Marcus had always insisted was inefficient. The warm water felt good. The repetitive motion felt meditative. This was my house, my time, my choice to waste on inefficient dishwashing if I wanted. 3 months post-surgery, I returned to Metropolitan General full-time. My first day back, the staff room went quiet when I walked in. Then Nurse Tanaka started clapping. Others joined until the entire room applauded. For surviving surgery, someone called out. For surviving Marcus, someone else added, and the room erupted in laughter. The gossip had spread thoroughly. Everyone knew about the Wednesday dinners, the emergency surgery abandonment, the police visit to the Ivory Room. I'd become legend, the nurse who'd sent cops to crash her husband's affair dinner. How are you really doing? Dr. Okonkwo asked during my follow-up exam. He checked my surgical site with gentle efficiency, nodding approval at the healing. Honestly? Better than I've been in years. That's common. Sometimes removing one thing reveals how much else was infected. He smiled at his own metaphor. The scar looks good. Another few months, it'll fade to almost nothing. I looked at the thin line on my abdomen. I don't mind it. Reminds me of when everything changed. 4 months after surgery, Marcus's mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Sophia. Elena's voice carried none of its usual aristocratic certainty. I owe you an apology. I've learned things about my son that shame me. The way he treated you, especially during your medical emergency, is inexcusable. Thank you for saying that. Harold and I are divorcing Marcus from family business matters. He's been moved to a subsidiary office in another state. You won't encounter him locally. She paused. I spent 10 years treating you like you weren't good enough for our family. I see now it was the reverse. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation. Elena Caldwell, who'd spent a decade making subtle comments about my career, my background, my insufficient sophistication, had apologized. Marcus had been exiled from the family empire. The Caldwell name was protecting itself by cutting him loose. 5 months post-surgery, I drove past the Ivory Room deliberately. It was Wednesday evening, the time Marcus and Victoria used to occupy their window table. The restaurant glowed with warm light, couples leaning across tables, wine glasses catching candlelight. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no ghost of jealousy. Just recognition that this was a place where things had happened, but those things belonged to someone else's story now. 6 months after surgery, the divorce papers arrived. Marcus had finally signed everything. The house remained mine. The savings account I'd funded remained mine. He took his watches, his golf clubs, his carefully constructed image that had crumbled anyway. Julian called when the papers were filed. How do you feel? Free, I said, and meant it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a movie alone. Bought popcorn, sat in the middle of an empty row, watched a romantic comedy Marcus would have called intellectually pedestrian. It was predictable and sweet and exactly what I wanted. Walking to my car afterward, I passed a young couple arguing in the parking lot. The woman was crying. The man was checking his phone. I almost stopped, almost said something, but what would I tell her? That sometimes people show you who they are and you have to believe them? That emergency surgeries and police visits and changed locks are sometimes the only language some people understand? Instead, I got in my car and drove home to my empty house that felt fuller than it ever had with Marcus in it. 8 months after surgery, I walked into Metropolitan General on a Wednesday evening for my shift. The day that used to fill me with dread, knowing Marcus would be at the Ivory Room with Victoria, knowing I'd come home to an empty house that somehow felt emptier than when I was actually alone, now felt like any other day. Keiko noticed immediately. "You're humming." "Am I?" "Some old song." "You look happy." She studied my face. "Wednesday used to make you tense. Now you're practically glowing." I hadn't realized I was humming, hadn't noticed that Wednesdays had lost their weight. The day that had symbolized abandonment for 6 months now just meant midweek, halfway to the weekend, nothing more significant than that. During my lunch break, I did something impulsive. I drove to the Ivory Room. Not to torture myself, but because I suddenly wanted to reclaim it. This restaurant had lived in my head as the site of betrayal, the place where Marcus had chosen Victoria over my emergency surgery. But it was just a restaurant. Just tables and chairs and overpriced salmon. I walked in alone, asked for a table. The hostess led me to a booth in the back. Not the window table, that felt too pointed, too deliberately symbolic. Just a quiet corner where I could eat dinner and prove to myself that this place had no power over me. "Can I start you with a drink?" the server asked. "Wine. Whatever's good by the glass." She brought a Pinot Noir that probably cost $20 but tasted like freedom. I ordered the salmon, the same dish Marcus used to get. It was good, not life-changing, not worth the price tag, but competently prepared and pleasantly seasoned. Halfway through my meal, I recognized someone across the room. Victoria Ashford, sitting alone at a small table, working on her laptop between bites of salad. She looked thinner than I remembered, tired in a way that expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. Our eyes met. She froze, fork halfway to her mouth. I lifted my wine glass slightly in acknowledgement, not hostile, not friendly, just recognition that we were two people who'd existed in the same story once. She looked away first. I finished my salmon slowly, ordered dessert, took my time with coffee. The Ivory Room was just a restaurant. The food was overpriced, the ambience was nice, and absolutely nothing about it was worth destroying a marriage over. When I paid the check, $68 for dinner and wine, charged to my own card, my own money, my own choice, I felt lighter than I had in months. Walking to my car, I passed the window table. A young couple sat there now, leaning close, hands clasped across the white tablecloth. They looked happy, unaware that this table had once been the center of someone else's crisis. Life moved on. New people made new memories in spaces that used to hurt. I drove back to Metropolitan General and finished my shift. Wednesday evening, same as any other evening, marked by nothing more significant than its place in the weekly rotation. That night, lying in my bed, in my house, taking up as much space as I wanted, I thought about how symbols lose their power when you stop feeding them. Wednesday had been sacred to Marcus and Victoria, a weekly ritual that mattered more than marriage vows. Now it was just a day, and they were just people, and the Ivory Room was just a restaurant with decent salmon. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "How was your day?" "Good. Worked. Had dinner at the Ivory Room. Saw Victoria." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, "You okay?" "Completely. It's just a restaurant. The salmon's overrated. Proud of you, sis." I set my phone aside and looked at my surgical scar in the mirror. 8 months healed, faded to a thin silver line that caught the light. Proof that bodies recover from trauma by building stronger tissue over wounds. Proof that what breaks you can also remake you into something more resilient. Wednesday meant nothing now. The Ivory Room meant nothing. Victoria meant nothing. Marcus meant nothing beyond a decade of my life that taught me what I wouldn't accept anymore. I got into bed and fell asleep within minutes, dreamless and peaceful, unburdened by the weight of other people's choices. 1 year after surgery, I stood in my kitchen making breakfast. Just for me, scrambled eggs how I liked them, slightly wet, not the way Marcus insisted they had to be. Toast with real butter, not the whisper he preferred. Coffee with too much cream because I enjoyed it that way. The morning sun cut through windows I'd left uncovered, no expensive blinds filtering the light to preserve furniture that didn't need preserving. My kitchen counter held things I actually used instead of appliances Marcus bought for their brand names and never touched. I thought about him sometimes, the way you think about a book you read years ago but can't quite remember the ending. Marcus existed in past tense now, a character from a different story. The anger had faded months back, replaced by something that wasn't quite indifference but wasn't forgiveness either. It was simply done. Finished. A chapter that ended when Officer Patterson walked into the Ivory Room. My phone rang. Dr. Patel, calling from the hospital. Sophia, I have a medical student shadowing me today. She asked about appendectomy recovery timelines. I mentioned your case, anonymously, of course, and she asked something interesting. She wanted to know if the surgery saved your life or changed it. Both, I said without hesitation. That's what I told her. Sometimes crisis reveals what was already broken. Your appendix didn't end your marriage. It just exposed what had been dying while you both pretended everything was fine. After we hung up, I sat with that truth. My marriage had been failing long before emergency surgery. The distance had been growing for years, in Wednesday dinners and dismissed concerns and slowly disappearing into furniture in my own home. I'd been waiting for permission to leave, for something definitive enough to justify walking away from 10 years and vows and the sunk cost of a decade. The appendix had given me that permission. Or maybe the text message had, "Take an Uber home, babe." 23 words that made it impossible to pretend anymore, that crystallized every small betrayal into one undeniable moment. I'd spent months thinking Marcus had abandoned me that day. But really, I'd abandoned the version of myself who accepted being second choice, who made excuses for being ignored, who worked double shifts to fund someone else's affair. The doorbell rang. Julian, stopping by before work with coffee and bagels, a Wednesday morning ritual we'd started 3 months ago. You look thoughtful, he said, settling at my counter. Dr. Patel asked if surgery saved my life or changed it. And? Both. But not the way most people would think. I sipped the coffee he'd brought, my actual preference, which Julian knew because he paid attention. The surgery didn't change anything. It just forced me to stop pretending things that were already true. Julian nodded slowly. You were already gone before the appendix ruptured. I think so. I just didn't have permission to admit it yet. I looked around my kitchen, at the space that had become entirely mine. Marcus gave me that permission when he chose Victoria. He made it so clear, so undeniable, that I couldn't rationalize it away anymore. Some people would say you should forgive him. I don't forgive him. But I don't hate him either. He's just someone I used to know who taught me what I won't accept anymore. I paused. Is that cold? That's healthy. We ate bagels in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Park tending her garden, humming the same Chinese songs she always hummed. Wednesday morning in Bellevue Estates, ordinary and peaceful and mine. Have you heard anything about Marcus lately? I asked. Working in the subsidiary office upstate. Dating someone new, according to his social media. Looks serious. Good for him. Julian studied my face. You mean that? I do. I hope he's happy. I hope he learns something. I hope whoever she is knows what she's signing up for. I finished my coffee. But mostly, I just don't think about him anymore. That was the truth of it. Marcus had become background noise, a fact of my history but not a presence in my present. The apartment he rented, the job he hated, the relationship he was building, all of it existed somewhere outside my awareness, irrelevant to the life I was constructing. My surgical scar had faded to almost nothing. In certain light, you couldn't see it at all. But I knew it was there, proof that bodies heal by building stronger tissue over wounds, proof that what breaks you can remake you into something more resilient. I'd built a new life on foundations I'd chosen rather than inherited. Decorated with joy instead of obligation. Filled with people who showed up when I needed them, who didn't make me earn basic consideration, who understood that love meant presence, not performance. This was what freedom felt like. Not dramatic or triumphant. Just quiet and true and entirely mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.